And his sons were the 12 Shvatim. Let's sing their names. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Yosef, and Binyamin. These are 12 Shvatim. Now, sorry, this story is all about the pasuk Shema Yisrael. When Yaakov had a custom that when his children were born, he used to give them the pasuk Shema Yisrael to wear around their necks. Right? Every night before you go to sleep, who says Shema? Raise your hand if you say Shema before you go to sleep at night. Right? You cover your eyes and you say the pasuk Shema Yisrael. Well, you know what? The pasuk Shema Yisrael is a very, 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 very old pasuk. It goes all the way back to our forefathers. And when his children were born, when they were little babies, he would write on a kamiyah. Kamiyah is like a piece of paper or a piece of parchment, the word Shema Yisrael, and he'd fold it up, and he'd tie it like a little necklace around their neck. It was like a paper they wore around their neck. With the word Shema Yisrael, it was only for whoever was born in the family of Yaakov Avinu. Like I told you, Yaakov Avinu had 12 sons, but he also had one daughter, and her name was Dinah. Dinah was very, very beautiful. And one day Dinah went out. She said, I want to go out and go and teach the girls over here all about Hashem. When she came out, there was a very bad prince. He was a horrible man by the name of Shechem. Shechem, who was the prince Ben Hamor, and Shechem Ben Hamor said, oh, this Dinah is so pretty. I want to make her my wife. Questions at the end. Put your hands down. I want to make her my wife. And so what did he do? He went and he stole her, Rahman al-Tilal. And he said, we're going to make a wedding, and you're going to be my wife. And he forced her to marry him. She didn't want to marry the bad prince Shechem. He forced her to marry him. And her two brothers, Shimon and Levi, got very angry, and they made a big war, and they got rid of Shechem. The children were told that Leah, from that wedding, that marriage, she had a little girl. And her name was Osnat. Osnat was incredibly beautiful. She was very, very lovely, and just like all the babies born in the household of Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov gave Osnat a kamiyah, like a piece of parchment with the pasuk Shema Yisrael on it. And he gave it to Osnat to wear around her neck to show that she was a descendant. She was one of the children of Yaakov Avinu, or the grandchild. She was his grandchild. But when Osnat got big, we're told, children, Osnat became very sad. She said, who's my daddy? I see everyone has a nice Jewish daddy. Who's my daddy? I know who my mommy is. My mommy is Leah, but who's my daddy? And then she found out that her daddy was a very bad man called Shechem, and that he forced her mommy to marry him. And Osnat felt very bad, and she said, maybe I'm not as good as all the other Jewish children of Yaakov. And the Torah tells us that Osnat actually, children, she ran away. She said, I'm not good enough. Maybe I should leave home. And as a young girl, she left home. And she gets sold as a slave girl to Egypt. She goes down to Mitzrayim. And she becomes a servant in Egypt. She still had her kamiyah to remind her that she's Jewish, but she becomes a slave girl in Egypt. And because she was so beautiful, a very rich lady really liked her and said, first she bought her as a slave girl, and then she said, I don't want to keep her as a slave. She's too pretty to be a slave. Her name was, this lady's woman's name was Zulecha. Zulecha was the wife of a man called Potiphar. You're going to see some of you may have heard of Potiphar already. And Zulecha said, oh, I'm going to adopt Osnat. Mwah, mwah, I like you. You can become my daughter. I don't have any children. You'll become my daughter because I don't have any children. And you're so pretty. And so Osnat children gets adopted by Zulecha and Potiphar. She becomes their daughter. I told you this whole story because the story I really wanted to get to is Yosef HaTzadik. Raise your hand if you know the story of Yosef who got sold by his brothers. Right? Good. Most of you, I see all of you almost know it. Good. You can put your hands down. So I'm not going to go into the whole story. But when Yosef was a young lad, if you look at all of their clothes, all the 12 Shvatim, right? They have regular clothes. On my puppet, look, Yosef is the only one with the colored coat. And his brothers thought, oh, Yosef thinks he's the only one who'll become the father to all the Jewish people. He thinks his way of learning Torah is the only right way. And his brothers got very angry with him. And they sold him as a slave to Egypt. He goes down and becomes a slave in Egypt. And he also lands up in the house of Potiphar. But he gets there, I said the story a little backwards, children. He got there before Osnat did. I just kind of told the story backwards. And eventually, children, Yosef lands up and becomes, let's just bring my big Yosef here. Do you remember the story with the king of Paro who had the dream of the 7 fat cows and the 7 skinny cows? You guys remember that, right? So, Yosef eventually becomes the king in Mitzrayim because Yosef helped Egypt get out of the famine. He told them, you have to collect lots and lots of food for the time when there'll be nothing to eat. And King Paro was so proud of Yosef. He said, I love you. Oh, you're wonderful. Went and he made him viceroy, second in command. Yosef was much older by now. He was already 30 years old. And he became king in Egypt. And he was the most important man in all the lands. And King Paro and all the ministers came and told him, Yosef, it's not right. You're such an important man. You're such an important king here in Mitzrayim. You have to get married. We have to have a nice big celebration for your wedding. You have to choose a wife. And Yosef thinks, oh no, I don't want to choose a wife here in Mitzrayim. I'm not an Egyptian. I'm Jewish. I'm the son of Yaakov Avinu. How can I marry an Egyptian girl? And every day, the ministers and the important Egyptians would come and say, come on, Yosef, you're a viceroy here in Egypt. You need to get married. We need to make a big party. And every day Yosef would say, well, I'm busy today. I don't like any of the girls you brought me. And every time they would bring a suggestion for someone for Yosef to marry. Every time Yosef would kind of make an excuse, and shake his head, and refuse to get married. Because of course Yosef didn't want to marry a girl who isn't Jewish. And he figured in the whole country of Egypt, there isn't any Jewish girls. Finally, Paro sent his ministers, and Paro himself came and said, enough is enough. You have to get married. Here in Egypt, we have a custom. We take the viceroy, we take the king, and we put him on a horse. And we decorate the horse with all kinds of beautiful ornaments and jewels. And we make the horse pull a big, gorgeous, open chariot, a wagon, a golden wagon. And The viceroy has to sit in the wagon. And all the girls come out. And many of the girls were told to climb on top of the wall to look at Yosef because he was very, very handsome also. Yosef HaTzadik. And all the girls have to take their necklaces or their jewels or their money and throw it at the king or at the viceroy, second to the king. And whichever necklace he likes the most, he picks up. That's the girl you can choose to marry. That means she's the richest and she honored you the most and she's the best. And Yosef thinks, oh my goodness, I don't care what jewels they throw at me. I don't want any. Okay, his beard keeps falling off, children, but I'm going to just imagine it with a beard, okay? Because Yosef was older at this point and he already had a beard, but it doesn't matter too much. So Yosef thinks, I don't want to go marry any of these girls. What will I do? He goes, oh, I don't know. Okay, I'll just figure something out. And he gets forced to go sit on one of these open chariots, and he gets pulled along the streets, and they're playing trumpets and music, and all the girls are running out to see Yosef, and they're all putting on their gorgeous clothing, and they're putting jewels and their necklaces, and they bring out all of their treasure chests, all different kinds of beautiful jewelry, and all the girls were running and jumping and saying, let me go first, let me go. I can climb on the wall highest. I want to see the prince. I want to see Yosef. Oh, I bet he'll like my earrings the best. Oh, my necklace the best. I bet he'll marry me. And another girl pushed the other one and say, no, get away. I brought with me a huge, huge diamond from my father's treasure chest. I'm going to throw it at the king, and he's going to like my jewelry the best. He's going to want to marry me the best because I have the best jewelry. All the girls started to push each other. Now, children, Osnat also had to come. Not to come would have been a terrible disrespect. Everyone was coming to see the king. And Osnat stood all the way at the back. She's like, I don't want to go marry any Egyptian prince. I'm a Jewish girl. I don't want to get married to some viceroy. Children, she had no idea that the viceroy, the king in Egypt, was none other than her uncle Yosef. He was older now, he had a beard, and I'm not sure, I don't know the history too well, that she even saw him. She must have been a very little girl when he left and went and became a slave, when he got sold as a slave to Egypt. And so Osnat thinks, I don't want to go to see the viceroy. But it was very disrespectful. People would think she's not coming out to respect the king. So she just stood on the corner and just kind of pretended like she's coming to look, but she didn't really care. And she certainly wasn't going to throw any necklace at him. And she didn't have any necklace. Remember, she was an adopted girl. She wasn't really the daughter of Zulecha and Potipharah. She had been adopted by them. And Osnat just stands in the corner, and Yosef comes and he gets pulled by the chariot, and everybody is singing and screaming. And Yosef keeps getting piles and piles of jewels fall on his lap and into his chariot, tons and tons. And he just ignores it. All of a sudden, one of the soldiers comes to Osnat and he says, hey, why aren't you throwing any jewelry at the king? And she says, wait. She didn't want to say that she didn't want to marry the king. That would be a gross insult. Don't you want to marry our king? Don't you think he's the most handsome? Don't you think he's the smartest? Oh, of course he is. Don't you want to marry him? Well, I am just an adopted girl. I don't have really fancy jewelry. And the officer finds a necklace around her. And he pulls it, he goes, you have something? I see, everyone has to throw something at the king. And so he pulls from her a kamea that had the Shema Yisrael on it. Remember when she was born, Yaakov Avinu gave her the Shema Yisrael. He'd give it to every one of his children and grandchildren. I'm sorry, girls at the back, it's really disruptive. You want to sit separately, this way you won't have to talk to each other. I'm sorry, guys, really it disturbs. So Osnat had this one necklace with her with the words of Shema Yisrael on her neck. And suddenly she realizes if she doesn't throw something at the prince, they're going to think she's being disrespectful. And before she knew what's what, the officer pulled at the necklace and said, go on, show that you also want to marry the king. And so she pulls the necklace, and she didn't really want to throw it. She didn't have a choice. She took it and she threw it. And it lands up on Yosef's lap. Now among all the jewels and all the beautiful things that Yosef gets, he sees a very strange thing. He sees a kamea, a parchment. Now he recognized the kamea because he had one himself. His own father, Yaakov Avinu, had given it to him. And he thinks, how in the world did such a kamea get to Egypt? And he says, you know what, I'm going to open it up and double check. And he opens it up and he double checks, and to his utter dismay and bewilderment, he sees it's the Shema Yisrael. And Yosef thinks, who has a kamea from my father? It has to be a Jewish girl. And so Yosef says, stop the wagon, stop the chariot. And everybody says, yay! Yay, the king chose a wife. He likes one of the pieces of jewelry. And he picks up the kamea and he says, who does this belong to? And everybody goes, oh my goodness, somebody just threw a piece of paper at him. How insulting. He probably wants to kill that person. He probably wants to throw them into jail and punish them. And the officer remembered, and he says, oh, I remember. It was that girl. I saw that girl. That one with the bow in her hair. And they pull, the officers pull osnat, and they grab her, and they say, you come with us. You're going straight to the dungeon. We're going to kill you. And all of a sudden, Yosef says, no, stop. Where are you taking that girl? And they said, well, she just threw a piece of parchment at you. How insulting. Oh, that was terrible. And Yosef says, no, don't throw her into the jail. Don't do anything to her. I want to talk to her. Bring her over. So they said, I'm in big trouble now. And they go and they call Osnat. And she comes. And poor Osnat was trembling. She didn't mean to insult the king or anything. And Yosef HaTzadik tells her, he says to her, that's a very interesting piece of parchment. Where did you get it from? And Osnat says, well, my grandfather gave it to me. And Yosef is shocked. Her grandfather has to be my father, because my father Yaakov is the one who gives out all of these kamiyot, only to his children and grandchildren. And he says, well, who is your grandfather? And he says, well, he's not from here. He's from a very far away country, from over the river. He is from the land of Israel. And he goes, really, what's your grandfather's name? And Osnat says, my grandfather is Yaakov Avinu. And Yosef gets shocked. He goes, who are you? Ora, please don't. It really disturbs. He says, who are you? Who are you? How did you get here? And she says, my name is Osnat, the daughter of Dinah. And everyone says, oh, the king's talking to her so long. He's probably going to really punish her big time now. And the king says, okay, I made my choice. I choose a wife. I want this girl, Osnat, to be my wife. And Osnat thinks, oh my goodness, I don't want to marry this prince. What in the world does he want from me? And she says, well, you really don't want to marry me. I'm a Jewish girl. I'm not from here. And you really don't want to marry me. And Yosef laughs. And he whispers to her, he goes, you don't understand. I'm your uncle Yosef. also Jewish, and he pulls out his own necklace and his own kaviyah with the Shema Yisrael on it, and he shows it to her. And she realizes that Baruch Hashem, by a great, great miracle, they both found each other. And they were the only two Jews in the whole of the country of Egypt. There were no other Jews there. He was the only boy and she was the only girl who were Jewish. They were the only descendants of Yaakov Avinu in the land of Egypt. And Hashem brought them together. And Baruch Hashem, Yosef was very happy, and nobody realized that he was marrying her because she's Jewish. He just said, well, I thought her present was very interesting. I liked the writing on her parchment that she sent to me. It was nicer than all the jewels and all the diamonds. And she's the one I want to marry. And nobody could argue with him because he was the viceroy. He was second to the king. And Yosef and Osnat get married. And for years and years, they kept it a secret. Only they knew each other. They knew that they're both Jewish. And they had two children, Menashe and Ephraim. And they raised them Jewish. And Yosef was so happy that Hashem sent him a Jewish wife. Because of course, as Jewish children, we only marry, Hashem's commanded us only to marry Jewish people. And they built a beautiful Jewish home together. And in this week's parasha, children, we learn about the great-great-great-granddaughters of Yosef. They were called the Bnot Tzalafchad. And they really loved the land of Israel and wanted to go and live in the land of Israel. But we will learn that on Friday when we learn the Parashat HaShavua. Okay, thank you for listening, Yaladim.